Welcome to the Courageous Leader Podcast. We discuss the need for courage in our work and relationships. Central to effective collaboration is the courage to relate authentically and openly with our strengths and also our requests. My name is Tom Richert.
And I am Joanna Lee, and our guest today is Bryan Wahl, an architect, principal at Bostwick Design Partnership, and Bryan lives in the Cleveland area. Welcome, Bryan.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Great. We're glad that you're here. Could you just give us a little background information, really let the listeners know, why'd you become an architect and why'd you choose that for your career?
Well, you would think it would be this big idea, but when I was 9 years old, I went up to my dad and I told him that I wanted to be an architect. I think it was because I was excited about seeing those people on TV draw and seeing those people on TV making these buildings, and I just got excited. So at 9 years old, I told my dad I would be an architect, and here I am today.
So when you're 9 years old, what kind of TV are you watching that you
The
are?
Brady Bunch.
That makes sense. I'm trying to think, where did I see people doing architectural design work on TV that I was watching at 9?
Yeah, how many people are architects because of the Brady Bunch?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a lot.
Great, good. Bryan is really focused on creating project cultures and successful cultures on the projects on which he works. And so, Bryan, when we say successful culture, what makes for a good project culture, and how would you describe that?
Tom, when I was thinking about what I would say during our time together today, I reflected a lot about the culture and what I try to create on project. And it's really around three things for me: a transparency of information, communication, and a promise. Transparency and communication might sound cliche, and everybody's using those terms today. But to foster true transparency and true collaboration, you need a promise. You need a promise from those individuals to do what they say they're going to do. I'm going to share my information with you. I'm going to share and I'm going to communicate with you very openly and transparently. And it's really super critical in order to make your project successful, to foster an environment and a culture that allows for the transparency of communication and for you to make reliable promises to the people that are around you. It's critical to the success. I can think of many examples of when I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody tells me, hey, I'm going to get you something by Friday, and then it doesn't show up. It's a problem when it comes to the culture I try to create and they don't deliver on their promises. So it's really about those three things for me.
Yeah, we like to use the term active commitment a lot when we're working with others. And you probably have heard us even say that when we've worked with your team. And so there always has to be something along with that promise. It's not just, these empty words. And we have a tendency, because of the way that we communicate normally, we aren't putting into practice that transparency. And so our words mean very little half the time, because what do? We see these other people that we work with and they're like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, good. Everything's good. And we go very little beyond that. And so I think when we have these interactions where we do need to make these promises because we haven't been practicing that transparency in the first place, we have a hard time with really having those active commitments and making those promises. And so how do you go about encouraging people to make those promises and really follow through with what they're saying?
Well, the only way that I can think of is, and this is a personal thing for me, which is actually doing what you say you're going to do and do it. I mean, it sounds so simple, But if you don't do what you say you're going to do, then the trust that you have established, the culture you try to make, is eroded in 30 seconds. Trust and respect, you can lose it in a second, but it takes you a very long time to gain. So by doing the things that you're going to say you do, by delivering on those commitments that you make, Joanna, that you mentioned, that's how you create that culture, by saying what you're going to do and then doing it. It's really that simple.
It's simple, but stuff gets in the way, right? Because it does sound very simple, but what are the things that you're seeing get in the way on some of your projects?
It's funny. Again, I was thinking about this and preparing for our conversation. It's the same three things that get in the way: transparency, communication, and making promises. Sounds funny, but if you're not willing to deliver on what you say, forget transparency and communication. It's going to go out the window. Because you're losing the trust of those folks that are around you. A lot of times, what else gets in the way? There are people around you that don't understand the importance of the transparency and trust and respect, and what they say in their behaviors get in your way from doing your best work. And I would say the other thing that gets in the way a lot of times is our industry is known for has a very long history of projects that aren't delivered in the best ways, on time, on schedule, the way the owner wants them. And it is such an ingrained mindset into the people that work in this industry that it's okay if I miss a schedule. It's okay if I'm over budget. It's so deep. It's hard to get their minds to change. And that's probably one of the biggest things that get in the way, is changing the minds of those that have been doing this for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, well, that seems to be across the industry. I mean, just that whole, what has been a tradition. And,
right.
You have a lot that hasn't changed, a lot that has, but, technology has changed and there's been certain shifts, but you still have people who have been in it for so long, who it's worked. This is how it's worked for us for this long. And, so that's a big challenge, to shift expectation in anything. I mean, if you have, I could think just relationally in families, if you were raised in a family where everybody argues and yells at each other and slams cabinets and, slams doors and all of that, and then you enter into a relationship and you think that's just how things are supposed to go.
Yes.
And then that's not how this person that you want to be with relates, and that is not what they were raised to do. And so you have to come together and figure out what works. And obviously one doesn't really work as well. It's not as healthy. It doesn't promote the trust. It doesn't promote the transparency. And so, I know my parents had to deal with that. Like, one came from a family where that was the deal, and one was like, yeah, we're not going to do this. So,
right.
It takes that. Part of being a courageous leader is stepping into what you need to do in the time where it's the most difficult and when others aren't going to follow along. And so for you, I'm sure you've had to model this and show and have it, be carried out to where people have that aha moment, and they have to go through that journey, with you, and you have to, go, okay, yeah, this actually works better when we do it like this. And it is possible to have projects come in on time, on budget. And for you, you've experienced even, more positive results in a very healthy culture.
Yes.
So what has worked for you? Or do you have something else to add to that?
Yes, I have a couple things. Growing up, again, you asked me what made me be an architect, Tom, at the beginning of this. And growing up as a kid, my dad was one of those. My dad was a banker. I mean, he was in the financial industry. I knew nothing about what he did other than him dressing me up in pinstripe suits because he was a banker. That's why I don't wear suits anymore. Anyway,
Yeah, but you're still one of the sharpest dressed guys. Anytime we get go anywhere where you are, you're always tip top.
Yeah. So my dad and I never talked to each other. We never communicated in a very open way. So, you say bringing your baggage to the project, Joanna. I bring a lot of, well, I'm just supposed to sit and wait until I'm called upon to talk. And each individual person brings their own viewpoints into how teamwork should happen. So, long story short, what I'm trying to get at is, we work on projects where architects and contractors, we all get together and we have our craft. I'm an architect. I design buildings. My construction manager friends build the buildings that I draw. But we've never sat down and said, hey, we should probably work on how we work together, right? We've never sat down and said, hey, we need a coach to help us work together. So a lot of times we're bringing people on project teams, and this is what I think helps make projects successful amongst different people, because in the end, it's all about the people, right? The building, my drawings, it's an artifact of what we do. So bringing people together and having someone help us talk in a way that we can work better as a group would have never crossed my mind in the world of architecture. But now that we've done it and we know the importance of it, that's what I would recommend to other teams is take time out of the project to talk about how the team is working, not just about the project itself.
Yeah. And I know one of the biggest aha moments along with that, and, with your team on one of the projects was, we should have done this sooner.
Yeah.
We should do this every time.
Yeah.
And we should do this often.
Yeah.
And, and we hear that over and over. And it's like you have the pushback because we've never done this before. Right. Why do we need to do, focus on the people side first? Why do we need to connect and be, sit around and, as far as we're concerned, working with us, you're going to have Lego bricks in front of you the whole time. How is that going to be effective? And how is that going to push our project forward and our goals and, meet all of our, our deadlines and everything. And so it's really cool when you get that. Yeah. And you have not only in the moment, you have people who are able to say, man, I really find working with you even more interesting, or now I know, oh, this is why you do things the way you do it. And, we're able to talk on a different level. And so like, what have you seen when you do find that, you've had success in, with on projects of, where you've had this higher communication, this transparency. What have you seen be, come out of that?
Well, I know that there's a lot of research out there. I've read a lot of books, and we know that trusting teams are teams that are successful. You brought up the Legos that you and the Lego blocks. The first time I used that methodology of how to interact with individuals was actually with a contractor, and I learned a ton about that person. And when I learned about that person and I understand how they saw the world, it made me relate better to them so that I could help them establish their, establish the way they want to look at the world, and they looked at me as well. They learned a lot about me. So I would say that the more you can learn about the person around you, the better. I mean, some of the projects I work on, this most recent project I've been working on, it's 3 years. It's 3 years long. I mean, I see the same people day in probably at my project sites over 3 years that I do anybody else. So they kind of be to know them and build those relationships.
So that's interesting, because while you're both talking, and I'm wondering too, in those exercises that we do with the Lego Serious Play, are you also learning about yourself? Because it strikes me maybe where the trust starts is, and where it breaks down first is trusting ourselves, right? And having having confidence.
You're always so good at this. Yes. Learning about yourself again, when I told you guys that, as a kid, I never talked. So it took me a long time to understand how to get even to my voice in conversations, and we're here at a podcast. All we're doing is talking. I did learn a lot, and I was able to create a different me in a way that met that challenge head on, to open up the environment, to help people collaborate better, to help people open up, because again, having those people are the only way you're going to get the job done. It doesn't build itself. It doesn't draw itself. Not yet anyway, with AI coming. It doesn't do that just yet. It's coming, but not yet. So it's super critical to make sure that the people can work well together than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that trust in yourself, I think, that does go back to this theme of courage, because you have to have that courage to say, I'm confident that what I have to say to others has value, what I'm doing has value, and I'm going to be very clear about it too. So I'm also, I'm comfortable and trust myself enough that when I hear someone push back or suggest that something might be a little bit better than what I'm working on, I'll listen to that, and I can take that into account. Yeah. I think it's easy to not trust ourselves, and therefore, in a sense, go with the flow, right? And do what everybody else is doing. Or what's often, and I'm sure both of you see this a lot, be vague about what I'm going to do. Right?
Vague happens a lot.
Yes.
But thinking about, what you said about, go with the flow. When you're a leader, you are the flow. You are helping create the flow, right? You have to be able to create environments where people are comfortable giving their selves to the conversation, giving their words, giving their ideas. I mean, that's what's important in the culture of project teams to make it successful.
Right, and I think really giving with clarity too, and because that's, you've probably been on projects where a lot of the projects and a lot of the work that we do is we use these practices called Lean in the Last Planner system, and we put down our work commitments and we put down the tasks, and it's really it's almost embarrassing when people sit down and they look at the list of the tasks and the commitments, and it's like, well, what did I mean by that? I'm not sure exactly. And when it's so vague, the person who authored it doesn't even know what that commitment is. That's a challenge. And I think that comes from a fear of, I don't want to be clear about what I'm going to do because I'm not even absolutely sure about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think a lot about my profession as an architect, and I'm an architect, so I can say just about anything I want to about architects because I know how they work. And it's pretty interesting to me that when you ask architects to write down what their steps are in a process, or what they're going to do, or how their work impacts others, they can't. And the reason why they can't is because they've never written it down before. They never sat down and said, well, I need to do X, Y, and Z in order for the next person to do X, Y, and Z. Or they've never sat down and said, well, I need this decision by, this time so I can keep the rest of the team going on everything else. So I think there's I go back to the transparency that I talked about before. Architects don't openly share how they get through their process. And for owners, I think it's important for us to share because they need to understand why they need to make decisions for us so that we can keep the process going. A lot of times owners don't understand what decisions they need and why. So I think it's architects' jobs to really gain their understanding into our process so that we can move the project forward.
Get the owner's understanding, but you have to understand it first.
Correct. That time I was talking about myself.
Okay. Yeah. It's I'm curious what advice you have to current architects. I mean, I get to work with architects a lot, and I like them, and they have these challenges though that you're talking about. So, and part of the challenges they have is, well, for right now, there's a group that they're working literally to 8 or 9 at night because things have fallen behind, and it's stressful, it's tiring. How do they avoid that, in your view? I mean, I've certainly given them my opinion, but what's your view? You're the architect, so tell us.
Thanks, Tom. The advice that I would give to other architects is do what you say you're going to do. Fulfill your promises that you make. There is a lot of burnout in our industry, and a lot of the things that you're talking about, working the 8 or 9 at night doesn't help the owner or yourself really to make the industry better, to make the processes better. So I go back to the 3 words that I started with, which is transparency, communication, and promise. Be transparent with everything. Be overly transparent, because again, architects don't like to be transparent with their information, and communicate more than what you think you should. I also think that architects like to, how do I say it? They like to create their art. Buildings to them are art forms, just like you paint a painting or you do a sculpture, kind of. It's their art, and they want to create something on their own. Mm-hmm. And a lot of architects feel that I am the creator, and nobody else's ideas can really participate in my creation. Right? This is pretty deep for me, but I feel that my creations are better because of other people, of what the construction manager or the person who is building the building or space helps my designs be better, or somebody who just came out of school that has fresh new ideas. I've been doing this for 23 years now. And somebody coming out of school has fresh new ideas to make the architecture better, right? So my biggest advice I would share with everybody: ideas can come from anywhere. Open up your process, open up your designs to make them better.
I think that is true across the board. So regardless of what industry, you have mentioned several things that it doesn't matter who we're working with. Yeah. These are the same issues, right? So you end up having this siloed work because of either that lack of transparency, lack of communication, empty promises, or that wanting to take that ownership of your own creation. Maybe even just that lack of clarity, being vague about what you actually need to do. We've heard a lot of people on different types of teams mention that, they had this training, but then they came into the actual work environment and they didn't actually get trained for working in that specific environment with the people that they would be working with and how that flows. So whether it's a newly educated person who just got certified and they're jumping in, or whether they had just come from another place, they might just be moving, into a different office or a different, hospital, whatever it is. And so there's a lot of learning that happens in that. And if you are stuck doing what you think you should be doing, and that's not the way it's done, you're not asking for help because you haven't you haven't felt that foundation of trust, and maybe there isn't one there to begin with, but you modeling to other architects, hey, I want to have somewhat of a collaborative design. And I know that my best work is going to happen if I am seeking out fresh ideas from these new people. Likewise, I also need to be looking to those who have gone before me and have been very experienced. And if we could take, that and pull it all together in any environment, any industry, it would be so much more enriched. The work would be, you would have, higher creativity, and, things would get done on a different level. And so, you mentioned, I don't know, what was done in the past, but when people are going through their schooling, and do they have any collaborative design work or is it usually individual?
It's the collaboration is starting to get more traction within the education environment, at least in architecture, but it's still very individual. It focuses on, ultimately we get licensed as architects, right? We're responsible for people's lives. So there's a lot of individual training that happens so that person can get to that point in their careers, wherever that is. So I think that's why they still focus on, individual people instead of the collaborative team environment. When I went through the education system, in my last year there, I had to work in a group of 4, working and making, creating a project with 4 of us. So that I had a little bit of that, but not clearly enough for the work environment. But I'll tell you, when I first started at a firm, I would come in every day, sit at my desk, and wait. And I would wait until somebody told me what to do. I don't know about you, but that's not very collaborative to me. It's more of a dictatorship, demand and control, than it is being collaborative and how people do their work and get through their work every day. So today, project teams are now understanding the flow of work so that that it's not as individual, starting within our own office, and then they take that out to projects, which I think really helps teams be a little more successful.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Tom.
Well, I think that's an interesting point to raise, that so many people are conditioned from school, even education, to work on their own. Because I contrast that with, my daughter is in theater and graduating from high school, but you're forced to be collaborative, right? The cast and the crew, or the cast and the crew, and you work together. But when you think about it, that's actually almost an anomaly in our, not only our education system, but also our work environment.
Yeah. That is true.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I mentioned this to, went to a What is Your Hybrid panel a couple of weeks ago. And so people were talking about, how are we going to do this? And, with people wanting to work from home, or, how are we going to have a more collaborative environments and have people want to come to work here and there. But, we have been conditioned to our grades in school, they're ours. And anytime we have group work, usually teamwork, as far as, that school work is concerned, we hate it. Because, you have the same people who are always pulling the load. And then you have those who are, just pretty much doing nothing, or, whatever it is. It's usually those group assignments aren't as positive as, they could be. And so in those group assignments, none of us were trained on how to work together as groups. We're just told, this is what you're going to do. And so we got very little training in the standard education. And so when the only time we saw that really is on sports teams, right? Or like Tom, like you're saying, like in an environment where you are forced because of what you're creating. You take an orchestra and you have someone who is perfecting their instrument and their piece, and then you bring all of these pieces together, and they have to learn how they fit individually, what they're bringing, their gift and their strength, what they're bringing to this shared work. And what comes out of that can be absolutely beautiful if they've learned how to do this together. But most of us have not had any training on how to work as a team. And, like we mentioned early on, even in our families, it's rare that you had very intentional training on how to relate to others and have a positive culture, where you could grow,
right.
And one of our biggest, hopes for those that we work with is you're not only getting professional development, you're not only getting your team development, but you're getting personal development as well. So for you, I know, you've come a long way, from this person who sat and waited to be told what to do fresh out of school, to now being in a, senior leadership role. And so, you've had to step into some things that you did not have the tools or the skills, and you had to figure it out, and you had to develop those in some way so that you weren't the person waiting to be told, so that you could, you had to master some things, and you're still learning and still growing. But what are some of those skills or some of that, that personal to professional development that you have acquired, that you've seen be able to relate over to, promoting the positive work culture?
Well, that's a pretty deep question, Joanna. So I'm not sure where to start with that one. But I've had a lot of help over my career. I'm starting with, as I was growing up through my career, a self-coach that actually helped me understand how my voice was heard and how my voice affects other people. Did a lot of reading. I've read a lot of leadership and how it works and how people relate to that. I've also done a lot of through my projects, done a lot of understanding of other people. I've worked with you and both you and Tom on certain skill sets that have really helped me be who I am. And along with a few people here at my own office that have helped me be who I am through all of the conversations over the years and all the hard times and all the hard conversations. They've helped me through that. And I think I am so passionate about communication, transparency, and delivering is because I think I'm a pretty diligent person, and finding the right avenues and the right people to help me along the way was critical to where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
You have shown a strong interest in taking action on just learning from people, and you're one of the few architects, probably you're the only one I know, that goes into the construction site and will talk to a tradesperson and ask them about their work and ask them about how the design impacts their work and learn from that. First of all, I would say that takes some courage. Most construction executives are frankly afraid to do that kind of thing and talk to people that are working with tools. So hats off to you for doing that. I'm curious, what are some of the most interesting things or helpful things you've learned from those conversations?
Yeah. So when I was on my very first construction project. So in architecture, what happens is you come out of school, you have to learn a lot, like we're talking about, over 5 to 10 years or whatever the learning time frame is before you can even step out on the site. You got to learn enough to understand how construction works so that you can have those conversations. And the very first time I did that, one of the drywallers asked me to come over and look at something, and it was a windowsill detail. And at the bottom of a window, we put this nice windowsill, that you could sit on, because it was deep enough where you could sit on. And he told me, he said, if you would just put a little piece of wood or a little piece of trim underneath the windowsill, because we didn't, when people sit on it, the gypboard wouldn't crack. And when it cracks, the wood would hide the crack because you sit on something and it was just a little bit. And I'm like, that was really good advice. And ever since that point, I really feel that ideas can come from anywhere. Mm-hmm. They can come from anybody. And in our industry, there's such a division between those building the building and those designing or being the executives or whatever, being the owner. There's such a division between those two folks or those two entities that it really hurts making the product better for the people using the space. So I really feel that asking those folks what they think can only make their job better and ultimately make the whole design better. I remember another situation when, Tom, you've seen me use this picture other times. I went in and somebody was, they were putting tile up in a bathroom. Yeah, so exciting, right? You're talking about a bathroom, tile in a bathroom. But the guy stopped and he looked at me and he said, wow, the architect has never asked me a question before in my life. This guy must have been in his 50s, 60s. I don't know, somewhere a little older, a little more experienced. And I just stood there and I'm like, why not? You're the one putting it together. I just draw it. I don't know if it's going to work or not, really. You're the one making it work. And he told me a couple of things of how to make putting up tile better. So I really do think you can learn from anybody, and especially those putting up the tile or putting that little piece of wood trim underneath the windowsill. Ideas can come from anywhere, and it makes it better.
Yeah, how do you get around? I know you've been doing it, but how do you convince other people to get around the idea that talking to these people might be scary, especially if you're not comfortable talking to new people or going out there and saying, hi, I'd like to just chat about your work. Because I'm serious when I say there are probably even construction executives that are afraid to do that, walk out in the field and talk with tradespeople.
Well, Tom, you know me a little bit more than anybody, and I used to be afraid to talk to one person, a group of people. Even something like this would have been a challenge for me. I would have showed up. I would have been nervous. I would have been scared, frankly, to have a conversation about my passion of architecture and my passion of teams. And at one point in my career, in my life, I learned that we're just all people. Whether it's you, Tom, or you, Joanna, sitting across the digital world, us talking on this podcast, to the person that's sitting next to me, or my boss, frankly, for that matter, right? Where, we all create these things in our brains of the conversation before the conversation. You're constantly thinking about that. So as soon as I figured out that we're all just people and we're all trying to do our job, we're all trying to go home safely, for the contractors, go home safely to our families. You just make it more on a human scale. So once I figured that out, it's pretty easy just to go up to somebody and start to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if using more of a mentee-mentor, I don't know if you would call it a practice, but starting that and encouraging others to do that. So this is what I do, and go through that. I do, we do, you do, so this is what I found very helpful. It helps me learn how to do better drawings. It helps me learn how to, do my work better so that I can not only serve those who are building it better and we have a better relationship, but then the user is going to also, have a positive experience. And so, I would like to share that with you, and let's go do it together. Here's how we do it and how simple it is. And, that way, a lot of times when we're afraid of something, we just need somebody to say, hey, this is what we're doing today. Yeah. And then you see you did it and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's, a way to establish something like that for more people, but that's for anything, right?
It's for anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the important things is, as a leader, as I grew in my career and I'm in a leadership position now, is who's coming next? Mm-hmm. Why are they coming? How can they be better at it? If I'm actually helping a few in my office here that are, 5 to 10 years within their career, but they're just starting to find their own voice. And I think I do that a lot, Joanna, and I take them with me, and I show them how I do it so that they can take what I do and make it their own, and then even make it better.
Yeah. And that makes an impact on them, because you are investing your time, your expertise and they see that. They know that's what's, that is valuable for them. And they'll take that with them. It reminds me of one of the questions we like to ask teams, and I'm sure that we asked something similar with you and your team, is thinking about somebody who has made a positive impact on your life. And, when you think back to that person and you think about what they actually did versus who they are, what they did may not have actually been, that significant. But when we ask that question, what typically comes out is you get more responses directed toward who that person is and their aspects. So like their personal gifts and strengths that they just exuded, because they knew that they needed to do something that was going to make a positive impact on that person. Or maybe they didn't even know. It's just because they were able to, be who they are. And so, that's awesome that you're able to step into your role as a leader, and you're able to, have that courage, whether you feel like it's courageous in the moment or not, or just this is what your responsibility is now as a leader and for the future generation. But that's cool, because it's part of you and your desire. And like you said earlier, your passion for teams and, and people.
I still remember, I'm a person who seeks out my own mentors. Some organizations set up a mentorship program, and then you got to go through it. But I sought my own mentors out, and this one individual stands out, and he was an architect. He worked here at the firm for a while. He ended up retiring and moving to Chicago. I was mad at him for moving, going away when I was just getting ready to do all of my big projects and that kind of thing. But I think the thing he taught me was enhancing my diligence and my perseverance in the world, because not just in architecture but all around as an individual, because he was very detail oriented, and he would always follow his projects from beginning to end. So he was always part of the initial interviews and getting the projects all the way to the ribbon cutting. And,
wow.
and what I learned from him was um, what you do in design affects those that come after you. And we had many conversations. We always would get down to the details and all that. But what I really learned from that person was everything we do affects somebody else. And I think it was a really important lesson for me. It might have not sunk in the first couple tries, but over the time that I still know this person, over the time that I've known this person, it's all about understanding how your role impacts the greater project teams, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I really love how project teams work. I love to create the environment of where project teams can work together, because it's how my work affects the person building it, affects the person using it, for years to come. I mean, the structures and spaces that we create could be in this world for hundreds of years. So that's one of my biggest mentee mentor relationship.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. And that's something that we feel strongly about, is that it's not about just this time, this moment in time, and this specific project, this specific team, this, issue. It should ripple. This should be big picture. And I used to say everyone wants to know they make a positive impact where they live, work, and play. And the fact is, everyone makes an impact where they live, work, and play, or live, work, and Delta uses live, work, and serve, which I love. Yeah. But but you make an impact. So what are the ripples that you want to make if and you have the power to do that on such a small scale, and one moment in time, one thing you say to the next person could affect them the rest of their life, or what this mentor did for you, even though they did leave you. I wonder if that actually had a positive impact on the way you do things. If they would have stayed, would you have not actually stepped into that as boldly as you did? But and that's a thing too, is, what are we doing when we are, planning for, moving on? What do we want to leave for those? And, that's really cool. We hear people talk about, this building's going to be here for this many years, but what if it's not? What about, because you had a part in that building process, is going to be there 100 years from now? And what is going to be more impactful? So it's those kinds of things, when we're just focused on, how much it costs, how, what are we, and, going back and forth about, well, they want to move this over to here now, and we didn't get, we weren't told about this, and, just whatever the silliness is, and some of that has to happen, but what you said about, that impact is really, it's really cool, because you have a choice to sit around and just be part of the wall, or you can, have an active role in where it goes.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd like to think when I work on my project teams and with individuals on project teams, especially the architects that I work with, is, like I said before in our conversation, architects are creating their thing. This is their thing. And a lot of times people will come to me and say, well, I want to create this. And I say, well, did you ask your contractor friend, your electrical friend, your mechanical, whoever it is? Do you involve all those voices into the conversation? And I think that, at least I hope, when I'm done at some point in my career, that people saw me as trying to open it up instead of close it, keeping it closed off, keeping the conversation closed instead of being inclusive in the dialogue. Because frankly, when our projects and our teams could vary from 5 people up to 500 people. Mm-hmm. When you think about all the people that touch our projects, so it's really important to be inclusive and transparent instead of just by yourself.
I think too, when you emphasize that to people, you need to make it clear that, have they checked with the electrical expert, the builder? You're asking them to involve them in the actual creation, not create and then get their opinion, which I often see people mistake. It's like, oh, you want me to collaborate? Okay. After I'm done, I will ask people what they think or what this costs to build, right?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Tom. Yeah, don't create something without their input. Yeah, that's really the goal. That's what makes it better. Tom, you asked as we were preparing for our conversation, what does being individual in your silo, how does that hurt the industry, or how does fear hurt the industry, and fear in conversations? And I thought a lot about this one. It's our ideas that come from anywhere will hurt this industry. Whether it's an idea around the way the teams work together, whether it's an idea about the little wood piece that goes underneath the windowsill, whether it's an idea about just how to build differently. That's what will hurt.
Yeah. And there are so many, our individual ideas can be powerful, but they're leveraged when people are together in on that conversation, and they can have those multiple perspectives are actually part of the creation process, as opposed to just giving opinions after the fact. And then you're also creating a lot of extra work too, if you have to start really accommodating those, or which often happens, right? You find out what you designed, the owner can't afford it. Yeah. And if you're, and for folks that aren't familiar with it, Bryan is very good at target cost design. So as his teams are making decisions, they're doing it in the context of what things cost, so they don't have to go and revisit the design.
Yeah, it's pretty, I'm going to use the word demoralizing for not only architects, but project teams, when they all come around and they create this idea, they create this thing, and then you say, hey, how much does this thing cost to somebody? And I'm kind of talking about the traditional way we deliver projects. And then that person comes back and says, well, it costs a lot more than what you can afford. It's really demoralizing for project teams across everybody, from consultants to architects to, our construction partners. It's really demoralizing. And why do that? Why do that to ourselves? Why not involve the people when they need to be involved up front, when the decisions are being made, when the things are being created? That to me is the future of what we do every day, is doing it together.
Great. So we're nearing the end of the hour, so I have some really quick questions for you, Bryan. So first of all, favorite architect?
Oh, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay. Books you'd recommend, 1 or 2?
Oh, shoot. Do another one. I wanted to say, what was yours, Tom?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Lean Conversations, as we're going to plug it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good answer.
You got to prepare me for these things, Tom.
All right. Favorite? Well, no, this is rapid fire. So quick.
Yeah.
Favorite TV show?
Law and Order.
All right. And favorite recreational activity? I know this one. Golf. And Bryan is almost a scratch golfer, at least.
Oh, nah, not that good.
Almost. You'll get there. You're far better than me. Good.
Maybe. Although it's funny, golf is an individual sport, so I don't know. And I like teams, so whatever.
Yeah.
It all works somehow.
You need some alone time.
I do.
Yeah. Good. Any last words, Bryan or Joanna?
Oh, I appreciate this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's good that we want to get out to people and talk about the leadership aspects of not only what I do as an architect, but how teams function together every day.
Yeah, I agree. And, we've mentioned that a lot of what you have talked about and we've talked about today is across any industry.
Yeah.
For anybody. It's so important to have that transparency, have a foundation of trust where you can have those conversations and make those solid promises, active commitments to each other.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you, Bryan, for joining us. This has been
thank you.
Yes, this has been the Courageous Leader podcast, and we look forward to coming back to you with more conversations with more guests. And thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.